2023 skidoos. I was kind of thinking it's kind of funny, 23 skidoo, isn't that like a saying or something? But anyway, so definitely a big year with the G5 chassis coming out. They released it in the trail sleds and they released it in the mountain sleds. First up, trail wise, so you can get it in a Renegade, an MXZ, you can get it in a Blizzard. The big news is obviously it looks quite a bit different, very modern, very futuristic. Definitely a good looking sled, but different enough that I think it'll take a little getting used to, at least for me. But I'm sure in a year or two I'll be loving it just like I was at G4. It comes with a 10-inch touchscreen display, so kind of much more in the wheelhouse of the Polaris 7S display. It no longer has that jog dial off on the left. It has just kind of your normal like functions like right here, kind of like your heated grip switches and all that stuff. I do believe it still needs to be connected to a phone to have most of its features, which I know has been a bit of an issue for some people, but in today's world it kind of makes sense why they would use that over giving it like its own brain, so to speak. Chassis wise, it's, you know, upgrade on the G4. They added a fourth motor mount to apparently help with vibration at idle, and that's not really something I've noticed that ever frustrated me, but I guess like the little bit I have noticed is when I have things in the glove box, if they're at all heavy, when the sled's idling, I can kind of hear it like jiggling around. But other than that, like I've never found them to idle all that harsh. But if that is something you didn't like, it should be improved with the fourth motor mount, so that should definitely be good. I know Skidoo was touting that some of the shocks are 3-position adjustable now, with like a soft, medium, hard.
So the new shocks have EA in the name, which is easy adjust, so that's going to be the 3-position adjustable shocks. There's a Pro 36 and a Pro 40. The Blizzard has the Pro 36 EA shocks on it, but the Renegade X does not, so kind of an interesting thing there. One thing I did notice is the Renegade X and the in-season Renegade don't have any adjustment on the front 2 shocks or the center shock. And when it comes to the Renegade X, you do get the easy adjust on the rear shock, but that's it. So that might be something that kind of frustrates some buyers.
I've definitely seen some guys saying like, oh, they're giving us less adjustability and trying to say that that's an improvement, which I could kind of understand, but at the same time, I think a lot of people out there don't touch their shocks. So the way Skidoo's looking at it, if we just give them 3 adjustments to keep it simple enough, first of all, people might be more likely to try adjusting their shocks, and second of all, for the majority of people that aren't going to adjust their shocks anyway, it's not really going to make a difference. Obviously, the people that like to fine-tune their shocks are going to be a little bit disappointed in that, but it just seems to be the way the industry's going. I don't think it's too big of a deal. The one thing I will say, when they're 3-way adjustable, I find I pretty much pick my setting I like and I leave it alone. So the Riot's been on 2 basically its whole life. And then I think last year for my dad, I put the rear suspension on 3.
So kind of some new packaging for 2023. In the full-on trail sleds, aka the MXZs, there's no longer an X model and there's no longer an Adrenaline. So the Blizzard's supposed to kind of combine those 2 things. It's going to be an in-season model. It's going to have the Pro 36 EA 3-way adjustable shocks up front and in the rear, but it does have an HPG Plus center shock. Those have compression adjustment, but it doesn't look like they have rebound adjustment. The sled's going to come with a 1.25 ripsaw or a 1.25 Ice Ripper XT track. It's got the rack steering system and it's got a fixed riser. There's been some updates to the XRS for 2023. I think they're kind of trying to get it back into that race replica type thing. I know a lot of guys have been upset that it's been watered down over the last couple years, especially in 2021 when they took the rebound adjustment away and went to a 36mm shock. So for 2023, the XRS has Pro 40 REA, so that's the easy adjust shocks. And they have rebound adjustment. There's a 1.5 ripsaw and a 1.5 Ice Ripper XT, fixed riser, rack system, and the suspension has rail stiffeners. So definitely happy to see that sled kind of easing its way back into more of a race replica type sled. I think it's going to make a lot of buyers happy. I am very intrigued by the Renegade lineup. Like I said earlier, I don't really understand why They still have an X package and a Renegade. I don't think a ton of people are gonna, feel very fulfilled with what the X package has now in comparison to the XRS. So I'll be interested to see if next year there's some sort of new package that comes out that kind of combines the Renegade X and the Adrenaline, and maybe moves them up a tier with those compression adjustable Pro 36 shocks.
In the mountains, the big news there is definitely the fact that the 850 E-Tech Turbo is now the 850 E-Tech Turbo R. There's no more restriction on the power. It makes 180 horsepower at sea level and 180 horsepower at elevation. So definitely big news, obviously, to compete with the 850 Patriot Turbo. Like I said last year, love seeing these two companies push each other and keep coming out with better and better stuff. The sleds themselves look quite a bit different than the trail version. Obviously, all the big memes everybody's been passing around are based on the mountain sleds. I think the trail sleds get a little bit less of that negativity around them. They're a little bit more conventional looking. One of the big things, like design-wise, is the belt guard is built right into the side panel now. And apparently the CVT is set up to kind of cool itself with fins, which I thought was really cool. Kind of like something out of an ATV. So that's definitely some big new tech. It also seems like they've gone away from the T-motion skid, which I felt like that was inevitable. And they now have more of a conventional rear skid that's better for keeping the sled on edge and all that stuff. So
they do still have the conventional T-motion skid, but they moved the rear arm back on that to reduce front end lift, kind of like they did on the Pro RMK. And then there's the T-motion XT. These skids are 3 pounds lighter and have an extra inch of travel. The T-motion XT has a fixed rear arm, so like I said, kind of getting away from that T-motion setup. It's also got full-length rods in the track, so getting away from the flex edge track. That's only going to be available on the Summit Expert models. Overall, the body is 3 inches narrower at the running board, so that's supposed to help with side hilling, kind of what Polaris did with that tapered tunnel last year. So, these two companies are obviously always pushing each other, and you can see again they're pushing each other here. With Dew, you can now get the 10-inch display on mountain sleds. They're between 6 and 16 pounds lighter, depending on how you spec the sled. I think overall it's really cool to see. I don't ride mountain sleds, but these two are always pushing each other. We have turbos, now they're making more power, the sleds are getting narrower. I did see somebody else on YouTube saying how the mountain sleds are definitely getting away from anything but mountain riding. That kind of makes sense, and I will say, like, that's why the backcountries exist, that's why the assaults exist, so I definitely don't blame them for really pinpointing what these mountain sleds can do and building them to do it as best as possible, especially when there's so much competition and they're trying to get your dollars.
Next up is the Neo sleds. So Skidoo now has a mid-range offering. It's going to have the 600 EFI engine that they came out with, I believe it was 2 years ago. Or was it last year? Maybe it was last year. And in one version it has 55 horsepower.
And that's going to be the Neo Plus. It's got a wider track with deeper lugs, upgraded shocks, and comes in yellow and black. The other option is just the base Neo, which has 40 horsepower. The essence of all these sleds is they have a lower seat, narrower handlebars, and a lower ride height. They start at $63.99, and overall, I think it's great to see more of these coming out. I think we're starting to see 550s get too old for people to justify buying them anymore, and now that kind of like entry-level segment, there's getting to be less and less sleds that can kind of fulfill that. So every manufacturer's got to come out with something. I'm sure we'll kind of see a push for the next few years, and then like before, they'll probably teeter out a little bit just because once the market's flooded with them, there's not really that super need anymore, and I'm sure whichever one is the best will rise to the top. That's not at all my place to say which one is because I'm not even in the market for these, but glad to see competition and glad to see there's something out there for the kids and the less experienced riders because we definitely need that.
They're kind of like the Indy Evo, and they're a full-size chassis scaled down rather than like what the Blast is, like just a mid-size chassis from the start. I think it'll do a plenty good job, and it'll give Skidoo that mid-range offering that they've definitely been lacking. And you can get that in a Summit, quote-unquote, and in like a trail version. So I think that'll be really good for beginners. And the one thing I've been kind of curious on is obviously the 600 EFI engine can make more horsepower than like that 50 number. Is there like a tune available where you could kind of turn it up in the future as whoever's riding it gets more confident? That would be kind of a big question for me. Just out of curiosity, I think that could be a nice feature, so that'll have to be something I kind of look into. Last is the 120s and 200s, which are basically built by Arctic Cat and Yamaha. You can now get that in a Skidoo and in a Link. Now you're able to kind of put somebody on a Skidoo product from day one all the way till the time they're finally on a full-size sled. So I think that's good, and I'm not overthinking the whole Arctic Cat Yamaha collab thing, just because there isn't a lot of design that has to go into a 120. So take theirs, paint them yellow, give the kids something good to ride, and that's about all you can ask for, in my opinion.
So there's obviously been a lot of speculation that Lynx coming over to North America was part of the Arctic Cat and Skidoo settlement over the pyramidal chassis. It appears that the 120 and 200 is also going to be part of that. Like I said before, I don't think that there's anything bad about it just being kind of the same sled. I'm glad that, you know, Skidoo has some offerings for the guys that have to have that yellow 120 or 200 for their kids. And I actually got to ride behind a 200 on the trail the other day, and there was a parent in front and a parent behind, and actually two of them in the middle. And it's just so cool. At that age, if I could be on the trails with my parents, I mean, that would be just the best. And if I was on something that I felt I could handle, that's trail legal, I mean, that's just, you can't beat that. So no matter what, happy to see the kids have some awesome options like this out there.
So next I figure we'll cover Lynx. Obviously I'm on my 2022 Lynx Rev RE.